What was the hardest choice you ever had to make? In hindsight, did you make the right one? Deciding not to stay in contact with my father anymore. In retrospect, I wonder why it was such a tough decision at the time. He is a serial adulterer who would bring girlfriends home with them and screw them on the couch while my mom was in the kitchen next door crying. He would leave for months at a time, leaving us to fend for ourselves while he followed his true love, whoever it was at the moment. He is diagnosed with a narcissistic antisocial personality disorder. He is on his 9th wife, and for many years he only stayed in contact with us because he admitted this to me when I was 9. He felt better about himself if he didn't have to think he was a deadbeat. But still, you know, he is my dad. I remember throwing the ball for the first time with him. I remember going to the movies with the family where he would sneak candy and let me eat some. In 2008 I was in a very serious car accident, with less than a 10% chance of living and less than that of being able to move below the neck. He waited a full week before coming to see me, where he put on his Father of the Year routine. I told him to leave the room and never come back. He still sends half-assed Christmas cards, always a month or two too late. Removing him from my life was one of the hardest decisions I have ever made, and I can honestly say I am happier for it. I no longer live in fear of becoming him. Had a lot of problems with illness in high school. Got to the point where I was facing repeating junior year for the second time. Decided to say frick it to high school and get my GED instead. Applied to college. Went to Arizona State for a year. And finished college at the University of Michigan. Made the right choice. Had to pull the plug on my son's life support. He was 11 moss old and went septic in the hospital. All of his vital organs slowly started shutting down, with his kidney being hit hardest. The nephrologist told us dialysis would prolong his life but most likely not save it. My wife and I asked her if she'd do that to her child and she said no. We made the hardest decision we'd ever have to make that day. I watched my boy's heartbeat fade in his mother's arms. He was heavily sedated 4 weeks before then, and it was odd to see no real change before and after he passed. I never want to feel the way I did in those moments when he passed. In hindsight, it was the only choice we had. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. My heart goes out to you on that. You experienced a parent's worst nightmare. For me, it was leaving my best friend's hospital room for the last time. I knew it was going to be the last time I'd ever see him. The hardest decision was getting up and out of that room once I felt the time was up. I wanted to stay. When I was about 8, me and a friend dug this tunnel we could get inside of. Unfortunately, it was near railroad tracks, and a train came by and caused it to collapse with my friend inside. My choice was to dig him out or run for help. My fear of angry adults made me decide to try digging. Maybe an hour later I got him out, but he was dead. Eyes and mouth full of dirt. I tried my best at CPR, but didn't really know how, then fled. They found him a couple days later, but I never told anybody I had been with him. I don't think they ever really figured out what happened. We were a good distance from town, so I don't know that running for help would have worked either, but the way I came to the decision has always haunted me. Oh my god, I can't believe you have to live with that secret. That's so terrible. Leaving an emotionally abusive relationship where I was on eggshells all the time. Had I known back then how amazing it is to be in a healthy, loving relationship, the decision would have been much more easier. Quitting my job to stay with my long-term boyfriend, now husband, to move 900 miles across the country away from all of my family and friends. I ended up finding another, better, job here, but I miss my family and friends a lot. I really hope I can someday again be closer, but I feel like this was financially and relationshipally the best choice. Upvote for relationshipally. I had to choose between leaving my job, friends, family and everything I had worked for my entire life to travel overseas, 12 countries, and 2 years later I definitely made the right choice. My ex-fiancée broke the news to me that she had been to the doctors and she had cancer. It was terminal and would be an excruciatingly painful period before her certain death. She told me she had less than 4 months to live. I was heartbroken, thinking about the short time we had left. So with tears streaming down her cheeks, she asked me to not stand in the way if she chose to end her life, which she planned to. She asked me to keep the cancer diagnosis and her plan secret from everyone, including her family. The decision to me was about what pain I would be willing to endure to lessen the pain of someone I loved. Would I give up the last 4 months I would have with her and suffer the emotional wrenching that comes from knowing you let someone commit suicide in order to make her last time on earth less painful? There are many things in my life I feel very confident about. That decision will forever haunt me. I will never come to a conclusion if I chose wisely or not. TL. Dr. Terminally ill fiance asked me to not interfere with suicide plan. My daughter was born with severe brain damage due to lack of oxygen. Deciding to be completely unselfish and signing a DNR, do not resuscitate, order had to be it. My girlfriend at the time had a normal pregnancy until around 2 weeks before her due date. At work one day she noticed that the baby was not moving, and after an hour her concern turned into fear. Off to the doctor we go. After failing a stress test and getting 2 zeros for tone and movement, an emergency C-section was started immediately. Michelle was born soon after and had such an odd cry. No holding or anything as her and I were sent back to the room. After 4 hours and no answers, we demanded to know what was going on. To find out that she might not even make it through the night. Fast forward a few weeks, a new hospital, and many doctors later we find out she possibly cannot see, hear and has no suck or gag, resulting in a Mikey button feeding tube. For her same we just wanted to give her the best life possible without holding her here to live it. It was her time, so be it. I was blessed with 15 months with my beautiful little girl. I never got to see her smile, but I did get to know her very slight responses to small things. I wish I was better at writing and had more time to elaborate, but I don't. Thanks for listening, Reddit. The hardest choice I have had to make was to leave school. I was 6 credit hours from graduating, but had a great job offer in hand that wouldn't wait. They didn't care if I graduated. My scholarship had run out and I was pressed for money. I took the job. I'm in my mid-30s now and it has worked out great from a career standpoint so far. I have been here 10 years and have worked myself up to a department head. I oversee 10 people directly reporting to me. I have 2 regrets. The first is that my lack of a completed degree prevents me from pursuing a graduate degree, either in my field or MBA, something I never considered at the time. My other fear is that my lack of a completed degree will hurt me badly if I have to leave my company and find another job. In theory, I believe my job experience and career success should stand on its merit, but I honestly do not know until I try. Leaving the place I grew up, moving 2,000 miles to be with my daughter after my wife bailed with her and didn't tell me until it was too late. Daughter was 19 months old at the time. Moving to be with her was very hard. I gave up everyone and everything that mattered to me except for that little girl. I have her about 3 days a week now, and she will turn 5 soon. We are closer than any dad and daughter I know. I made the right choice to leave my abusive husband. It was the best decision I have ever made, but I wish I had the strength to have done it sooner. I recently left my abusive ex-boyfriend. It was extremely hard, but his final tantrum set everything in stone for me. I too wish I had been stronger and done it earlier. But woohoo for you and me. It is such a weight off my shoulders to finally be free. Leaving my daughter. Her mum and I didn't get along very well, and we decided it was in the best interest of all of us if I were to leave. We did not take this decision lightly. We talked long and hard about it, and in the end, something had to be done, and we did. Hardest freaking thing I've ever had to do, but we knew this was the only option to not frick up our daughter's life too bad. So, I became a weekend dad. That was about 17 years ago, and our daughter is now 19. And we all did get used to the changes in our lives, but dang was it hard. Writing this down now still brings a tear in my eye, but it really did work out for the best, and she's a generous and gorgeous person, who incidentally just left after visiting her dad for a few days. She's awesome. Becoming a weekend dad isn't leaving your kid. Leaving your kid is moving away and not really giving a crap about the kid. Leaving is refusing to help the kid at all. Leaving is seeing them once a year with the mistress that you left their mother for. You didn't leave, you simply changed the home situation for the better. 2 happy homes is better than 1 sad home. My boss highly recommended to me that I give myself a bigger raise than I already had. That raise came from a finite pool of money, from which I also had to assign to my own staff. In other words, 8 people including myself had X money to share, and I assigned who got what. It was a really crappy position to be in. This is fairly common in a management position, especially in sales. You're given a payroll allotment. Keep the leftover bonus for yourself. Calling off my wedding and leaving my alcoholic fiance because I knew the only person who could help him was himself. It was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. In hindsight, absolutely the right decision. The day after we split, he got into AA and has been sober almost 16 months now. We got back together just over a year ago and I couldn't be happier. The best part being that he got sober and made all those positive changes for himself, and because of that, they've stuck. The fact that you got back with him after he became sober will probably keep him sober forever. That's a beautiful story. My college major. Freaking heck. I wish I would have went for what I wanted to do rather than what my dad told me to do, going for money. Yep, same here. Regret my major so much. I loved it then. I still do. But I wish I took it as a minor or just read the material instead of majoring in it. Such a waste of time and money. Cutting my mother hour of my life. While I love her as the woman who gave me life and nurtured me, the person she is simply became too much to handle. She had a habit of blaming me and my sister over all her problems, unfulfilled dreams and ambitions. Her successes became our failures for not reaching her level. Nothing was ever good enough, and even the simplest of mistakes was cause for her to verbally assault us, making us feel absolutely worthless. However, when she had a problem, we had to drop absolutely everything to try and fix it. And if we didn't, the situation escalated out of control. Eventually all problems combined began to take psychological tolls on me and my sister. It got so bad that she openly accused my sister of sleeping with our father and plotting against her. Curiously enough, after such wild accusations she would usually forget them the following day, showering praises and gifts as a means to fix things. At first it was simply natural, a habitat I was born into, so to speak. As I grew older it became annoying, then insufferable, then unbearable. Constant tension, no room to speak or to give an opinion. I felt like a prisoner whose tongue had been ripped out. Fed up, I pleaded her to get help, to try and see herself through our eyes. She refused and further deepened her conspiracy theories. When I was old enough, I packed my things and left, never looking back. My sisters and father did the same afterwards. It's been 3 years since that happened. I still talk to my mother, as hypocritical as it may seem, and all she ever does is complain as to how we all abandoned her in cold blood. Never once has she admitted to herself her own faults and is still horribly quick to judge and condemn. I honestly don't know if this situation will ever be corrected. Am I a terrible son? Yes. Am I a terrible person? Perhaps. Do I regret doing it? Yes. I was left with no other choice, however. If I hadn't left when I did, if I hadn't valued my mental welfare enough to finally free myself from such a situation, I am positive I would have done something terrible. To myself or to others I can't be sure. Sometimes in order to survive we must willingly leave behind what we hold dear. I was 24 and had been dating a girl for a couple months. She was on Depo-Provera even though her gynecologist said it was highly unlikely she would get pregnant due to issues from a situation that happened to her in the past. She got pregnant anyways. After mulling over the decision for a couple months we decided to give up the child for adoption. Some of my family disapproved, but frick them. We weren't even together a year when she had the baby. We ended up staying together for a couple years but drifted apart. I've gotten to see some updates about the child via the adoption agency and he's in a loving family. It was the hardest decision I ever made, but I believe it was the right choice. To move in with my long distance girlfriend at the time in the state where she lived. It was pretty far away, and I knew nobody there, and only knew a few things to do in town. I didn't do it. While I don't regret this choice every day, I do think about it quite often and I am like, well, sufferer hiffy, yeah, frick that one up pretty good. For what it's worth, my ex did that for me, and in hindsight it was the wrong decision. Moved up here where he knew no one but me, from small town southern US to big city New England, and he was completely miserable. There were other reasons too that it didn't work out for us, but the fact that he hated it here and wished every day to go home didn't help one bit. Telling my dad that I walked on my mom cheating on him. That night and the following weeks were living heck, and our family nearly fell apart, but the events that followed saved my mom's life, my parents' relationship, and our family from tearing apart. And it's the reason I'm with my fiance. Having my father taken off of life support. He had problems with cancer since I was 12. All starting with prostate cancer, which he was warned of before I was born, but decided to ignore for as long as he could. Then after going through surgery and radiation therapy, he became cancer free for over a year. Then he was diagnosed with metastatic bone cancer, which started in his ribs and moved to his skull. Finally he decided to go through chemo, which he was not very optimistic about. The chemo would make him sick about 2 weeks out of every month. Sick ranging from not wanting to eat, to not getting out of bed. During one of his sick days he was having severe gastric problems. I gave him his medicine, tucked him into bed and said goodnight. I had to go to work that day. My older brother was to spend the rest of the day with him. By the next day he was out of his mind sick. My brother and I considered taking him to the hospital, so we called my mother, a nurse who was at work, for mild consultation on the subject. She said to wait until she got home. I went to work. Before I left, I kissed my father on the head. He said in his delusional sick state, "Get the frick off me," which was the last thing I ever heard him say. I went to work and midway through my shift I get a call telling me that my father was in the hospital and was about to undergo surgery to remove various parts of his gastric system. His colon had burst. I asked if I should come in, and they said he was already under. I stayed at work and acted like nothing was wrong. He was in a coma, fully septic, for a few days, and they tell us that there's a chance that he will come out of it. They also added that he would have to be on dialysis for the rest of his life. My father was not the type of person who would be up for this. He had several talks with my brother and I about these situations, with the basic idea being pull the plug. My mother came into my room one morning and woke me up. This was Judgment Day. She asked me if we should take him off of life support. My mother loved my father more than anyone. She couldn't make the call, even though she knew it was what he wanted. It was left up to my brother and I. The call was made. We all stayed by his bedside until he was gone. It has been difficult emotionally as well as financially. My father made up more than 50% of our family income, and I've been wanting to move out for some time. But my mother would not be able to pay the bills without my contributions. She would never accept any money from the government. I will stay with her as long as she needs. I have no regrets about taking him off of life support. This happened a little over a year ago, and even though the year has been very hard on us, we have survived, and our second Christmas without him ended up being a good one. TLDR. Dad was sick, went into a coma. We ended up taking him off of life support. No regrets. To pay over $3,000 for a cat emergency surgery. To wipe out savings pregnant wife and I have, or let the cat go. Long week that was. Whoa. $3,000 is quite a bit. I often run hypothetical situations involving money to my wife, because it's interesting to find the cutoff point. Like in your situation, $3,000 was too much, but obviously $1 would have been okay. So, somewhere in the middle there has to be a yes/no cutoff. Quit my job and get on a political campaign with an expiration date, election day, and no guarantee of a job afterwards, or stay in my nice cushy small town job that I could keep for 30 years if I wanted. I took the chance and it's worked out amazingly well. When I decided to quit smoking pot, it was like murdering my best friend. I actually grieved. I wouldn't take it back for the world, and my decision has allowed me to finally become an adult. I had a cat for 18 years. She was my best friend. She had one vet visit her entire life, only after my mom ran over her leg when she was leaving for work. Haha. One day I noticed she was scratching her chin to the point that it was raw. I took her to the vet and they told me that it was cancer. They gave her a shot of something that may help, but most likely would not. I watched her get a little better for a few days, not scratching and eating food like normal. Eventually she looked very uncomfortable eating, grinding her teeth when she chewed, so I started mixing her food with water in a little food processor. At this point, she began bleeding from her mouth quite a bit. It was at this point that I had to let her go. I called the vet in the morning, made an appointment for 12:30. I laid in bed and talked to her all day, telling her how much I loved her and how she was such a good girl to me. I took some pictures of her that day, and she never looked more beautiful. When the time came, I couldn't do it and called the vet, asking if I could come later. They told me to come at closing time, as there wouldn't be anyone in the building at that point. Taking her there was the hardest, most heartbreaking decision I've ever made in my life. I had my last few moments with her and walked out when the vet came in. I couldn't handle it at that point. When I came back in the room and saw her laying there in peace, it killed me, but I knew she wasn't in pain anymore. I gave her my final goodbye and gave her one final kiss. This was over 3 years ago and I still cry when I think about her. Looking back, I should have done it sooner, but it was hard for me to say goodbye to my friend. I still miss her every day. R.I.P. Flea. I never asked for these feels. I made the decision to stay in California instead of going to Army basic training, both because of a girl and slight medical problems. Nothing major, but could have hindered me. Did I make the right decision? Number. I healed just fine. I'm having trouble finding job as an EMT. I was going to be a combat medic, and now that girl I stayed for is engaged to someone else after less than 6 months. She cheated on me, left me for him, and moved down to Los Angeles with him. It's been a rough year, and I regret that decision every day. I got my high school girlfriend pregnant. She was 17. I was 19. We learned nearly 4 months in. Due to some health issues with my girlfriend and the birth control she was on that occasionally caused a skipped period. We were also in the process of breaking up when we found out. After sitting down and doing our best to talk about this as adults, we decided that not only would we keep the baby full term, we would raise it. I was going to college 30 minutes away, so I came up every weekend, going to her house and taking care of the baby. By then, we were broken up, but we came together for our daughter. This was nearly 10 years ago. I'm now married to a woman who is an amazing stepmom to my daughter. This baby that we could have let go is now one of the smartest kids in 4th grade, tutoring special needs kids in the same grade during recess. She is the picture of what you'd want in a kid. She's more intelligent than any of the 3 of us were at her age, and more patient than any of us are even as adults. She wants to be a social worker. I'm tearing up writing this, but I am so very proud of the work we've done to ensure that this kid does not for 1 second suffer in the ways that so many kids born to teenagers out of wedlock have. That she has a mom and a dad, and that we both are significant influences on her growing up right. TLDR. Teenage pregnancy and determined parents and smart kid equals victory. To face the truth and end the most important relationship of my life or simply carry on. Oh man, sometimes I'm such a coward. No, you're not. This is the situation for many people. If it's a romantic relationship, I recommend reading Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay and all the 7 principles for making marriage work. The first helps you realize what factors mean you should really get out. The second helps mend if you're interested. If it's not romantic, sorry, nothing on that. Good luck. Whether or not to have an abortion when I was pregnant at 18. All my friends and family were pushing me to get one because the father was an abusive butthole and I had just started college. I didn't do it and it's the best decision I've ever made. My kid is now 12 and has a fantastic life thanks to me and my husband who I met when she was 2. Not quite sure I'd be able to do as good of a job raising a kid if I were to do it now. This will get buried and isn't as serious as having my folks arrested, but it would be leaving my abusive 5-year relationship with my GF. She was mentally and physically abusive, would constantly tell me I was garbage, that I didn't deserve her, that I would be better off dead. She was my first love, my first real GF, the person I lost my virginity to. She would slap me hard, punch me, pinch me, cut me with her nails. She would do this in front of my friends even. I was depressed because of this and lost a lot of friends because they were tired of watching it. One day I had a revelation that I was better than this. I broke it off, said we were done. This wasn't an act and that we would never be together again. She called me literally over 300 times during the next 2 days, threatening to kill herself. Uncontrollable rage and emotions. Her parents and friends called me asking me to at least talk with her and explain everything more fully. to give her another chance. I refused. In the end I lost more than 10 friends, a GF, a family who really took me in and treated me in a way I had never felt before because my family is very, very small and has never had that kind of relationship. It was the best choice of my life. She started looking at herself more serious, went and got help, and I met and fell in love with an amazing woman whom I plan on proposing to in a few months. Life has never been better. I have never told this story. Thanks for giving me the chance, Reddit. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.